Learning Unplugged.
And welcome to another episode of Learning Unplugged. My name's Lucy and this is Nina, and today we're here to talk about parent coaching and kind of different ways that you can educate your child. So welcome, how are you?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm good, thanks for having me.
Good, it's lovely to be here. So kind of what are you working on at the moment and kind of how did you get into everything?
Yes, at the moment I'm doing a few different things. I'm doing a PhD part-time in education, and I also support parents, either one-to-one or in a couple usually.
Yeah. So is that kind of like therapy, like kind of sessions, or?
Yeah, it's parent coaching, and it kind of works on different levels. So, you know, sometimes we go quite deep and look at, you know, the person's own childhood and what the root causes might be of the struggles that they're having. But I also look at things like kind of positive communication and how to play with your child and just the kind of the practicalities of day-to-day parenting as well.
So what's the kind of things that you find most kind of coming out of those conversations?
Yeah, I guess something that a lot of people struggle with is, you know, knowing how to handle their child's behaviour or how to maintain boundaries. And I think something that I really encourage in people is just to get curious about what might be going on for their child underneath that behaviour, because I think all behaviour can be seen as a form of communication. So it's sort of learning how to really tune into your child and understand what might be going on for them.
I mean, every child's different, isn't it? So there's not kind of those set rules that everything's going to work for every child, every parent as well. So it's kind of coming up with those kind of different ways, isn't it?
Yeah, and also that your child, you know, they're changing all the time. So you have to kind of get to know them again at each different developmental stage, which is quite hard as a parent.
Yeah, I can imagine. What's kind of the things that kind of come up most kind of in those transitions? Obviously puberty is a massive thing, but not only that, kind of the transition between different school years and things like that.
I think something really interesting about teenage years is that there's this process going on in the brain where the neurons kind of slightly rewire themselves. So the brain kind of prunes away all of the synaptic connections that are not being used very frequently and strengthens the ones that are. So often when it might look like your teenager is suddenly regressing a little bit or they're becoming very disorganised, but it's because this amazing process is going on. So helping parents understand how to support their teenager through that can be really helpful. Yeah.
So do you have kind of a background in that kind of science part? It sounds like you kind of know a lot about kind of how the brain works, which I find so interesting.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm just kind of really like interested in all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I trained as a Steiner teacher.
Right.
I don't know if you've heard of Steiner.
I don't. Enlighten me.
So it's quite a child-centred approach to education. It was invented by this guy called Rudolf Steiner about 100 years ago, and he was kind of a bit of a mystic visionary, and some of the things about Steiner education are amazing. Like, he understood really early on that sleep is part of the learning process. Things like this. So in some ways it was quite ahead of its time. But you know, that there's also this kind of interesting mystical element to it that's not for everybody. But I think the outcome is that there's a lot of kind of respect for children, and also the school's very beautiful. Like, you know, that there's lots of like nature-based activities and respect for the seasons, and I think a lot of the stuff that, you know, maybe we've lost in mainstream culture.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I think everything kind of from my kind of background in school and education, that everything is kind of that focus on exams or coursework, or you've got to know this for the curriculum. I think there's so much else that you can learn through nature, through arts, through different ways of learning, kind of be able to have that more well-rounded education.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's what I'm really finding in my PhD as well, that it's about kind of educating the whole person or supporting that person to develop into the kind of fullest version of themselves, actually.
Yeah, definitely. I think kind of education, it's everything, kind of the basis. But there's so many more things that you can develop through different connections. I like the thing that you said about like kind of the mutual trust between kind of the teacher kind of role and the students. How important do you think that kind of trust is?
Yeah, I think in a way it's the foundation for learning, because I don't know if you remember at school certain teachers who really inspired you. And actually those are often the subjects that we find the most engaging when we really feel seen and cared for by our teacher. So the school that I'm doing my research in, it's a place called the Self-Managed Learning College in Brighton. The first thing that the children do when they arrive is that they sit with one of the teachers, and the teacher kind of draws a timeline of their life and they tell the student their life story, and then the student does the same. And it's partly a way to help the student understand what it is they're good at and what they're interested in, but it's also about kind of building that relationship as a sort of foundation on which everything else can grow.
Yeah, I think that's so true, that kind of the basis is kind of everything and you grow from that, and that kind of understanding of where someone's come from and kind of the difference as well, and like those timelines you were saying about kind of the difference of a student who might be 8 years old, their lifetime and what they think is kind of the most important parts of their life will be totally different to their 30-year-old teacher. And kind of having that kind of mutual trust and respect that you're at different points in life, but you're kind of building on each other's experiences, because it is a learning experience from both sides of it. I think teachers can learn a lot from students, and obviously the other way around. So I definitely think that's kind of something that should be worked on in schools more, kind of the building on connections.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is actually there's a project that was started in the University of Bath called Attachment Aware Schools. So it was trialled in some schools in the area, and they taught the teachers how to develop secure attachment bonds with the students. And they found that not only did their educational performance improve, but their behavioural problems improved, and it was beneficial on so many levels. So I think, relationship building is really key.
Yeah, really key to kind of everything, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
And so I know that at the moment you're kind of homeschooling your son. So how old is your son?
He's nearly 14.
Nearly 14?
Yeah.
How long have you kind of been homeschooling for? How did that kind of happen?
Since he was 8. So he was at a Steiner school for a little while, but actually it didn't quite work for him. So I was looking for an alternative, and he initially went to a place called the Garden, which was like a very kind of outdoor based setting, which was great for him. So he got to be kind of outside in all weathers, which I think's been really good for him building resilience. But it was partly my kind of journey into home educating that led me to want to do a PhD, because I think there's a lot of information out there. And I think within the home ed community, it's possible for people to kind of fall into being a little bit dogmatic about certain principles. And I just really wanted to know, what does the evidence say, like what's actually effective in terms of home educating.
So how does your kind of home education work, if you kind of don't mind me asking?
Well, at the moment, my son goes to, it's kind of like a parent-led collective. So a group of us who home educate decided to kind of like pool some money so that we can pay for a tutor a few days a week. So he has that, is kind of one part of it. He's also kind of quite a good self-directed learner, so he does some stuff on his own. One of my friends is mentoring him at the moment and teaching him like the basics of car mechanics. So I guess that's what's great about home educating, is that you get to tailor it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that's lost in schools is the personalisation, because I mean, I get it, obviously, like there's a class of 30 people, you can't give your attention to each individual student at every point in time, but I think there needs to be done more in the curriculum kind of that does tailor that education to them, because as kind of we've been saying, it's not one size fits all. Every child will learn differently. And I think that kind of the personalisation is what really kind of develops them further and kind of builds on that basis of knowledge that we were saying about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that's exciting about the Self-Managed Learning College is that it's they're kind of creating a context in which that can happen, because it's hard to be a home educator. Like it takes a lot of kind of energy and dedication, and I know that's not available for everyone. So if we can kind of find ways to do that as a community, then it's much easier.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think it's about kind of, in a way, it's trusting children that if we offer them the right opportunities, that their natural desire to learn and their curiosity will be kind of sparked by those experiences.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that you've written a book recently. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Kind of what it's about, kind of how you got to writing it, I suppose.
Yeah, so the book I wrote actually a few years ago during lockdown. And the idea is that it's a sort of creative guide to becoming a parent, because I feel like there's a lot of preparation geared towards birth, but maybe not enough preparation for actually becoming a parent. And I think it can be a big shock for people when they're kind of hit with the reality of that. So the book's designed as a process to help you kind of learn some parenting skills, but also kind of go through a process of preparing on an emotional level for becoming a parent as well. Yeah.
I think, I mean, not that I have personally gone on that journey, but I think kind of the bringing that new life is amazing, and then you kind of get to that point, you're like, oh my god, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Kind of, and I can imagine kind of the emotions, the hormones that are running through your body must be like overpowering.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there's so much information out there as well. You don't know what to believe, kind of thing.
Yeah, so I wanted the book to be like I've made it kind of beautiful, so I've illustrated it and just tried to kind of condense down, you know, the most important bits of information, you know, like the latest research, just to kind of make it really accessible for people. What's
your kind of favourite thing that you kind of found out through writing the book and through your own experience as well?
I think something I'm really passionate about is that parenting is essentially a relationship. So it's not something that you do to your children, it's something that you are for them. So it's just about kind of really cultivating that deep sense of connection with another human being, I would say. Yeah, definitely. I think that kind of the mutual trust that we keep building on, but obviously as an infant, there are barriers to that because they can't speak. Yeah. So kind of figuring out, okay, that means this means that, and kind of having the unsaid communication in a kind of way between kind of mother and baby, or parents and babies too, like having that kind of trusting relationship that can build on and grow as they grow as well. Yeah, I think one of the most exciting things for me about having a small child was like watching his personality emerge, you know, because you go from like having this tiny baby that can't do very much, and then suddenly, like, I remember my son, he was less than a year old, and he started playing this little game with me that he initiated himself, and he was kind of offering me the rice cake, and I would reach out for it, and he would sort of take it away before I put my hand down. And I was like, wow, like I didn't put that there, it's just emerging out of him, and that's really fascinating. Yeah, I think that is kind of, and seeing them obviously grow as well, and learning those different little cheeky personality traits and things like that, I can imagine is kind of what being a parent is all about at the end of the day. Definitely. Perfect. Well, we're coming to the end of our podcast, so I just wanted to ask kind of what's your final message and thing that the viewers can kind of take away from this podcast. I think just to kind of enjoy the time that you have with your children when they're small, because it, you know, everyone says it, but it goes so quickly. So just trying to kind of find, you know, those moments of connection in everyday life. Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you next time on the next episode of Learning Unplugged. Goodbye.
Learning Unplugged.